Over the course of his career, Dave Mustaine was known for running his mouth as much as he was being a badass on guitar. Despite his intelligent political nature, it also came with a lot of criticism as well. And that's before I begin the feud. As many of us are aware, there was the long-running Metallica-Megadeth feud running throughout the 1980s. Feud with Metallica just overshadowed a much bigger feud between him and Slayer that would go on and off for the next 30 years. As many of you metal historians may know, Kerry King's brief tenure with Megadeth began for their first 3 shows, actually. He would later depart in October of '84 due to creative differences with Dave Mustaine, but the hatchet was far from buried. In 1985, Megadeth were on tour promoting their debut, Killing Is My Business. Originally suggested by Brian Slickle to co-headline a tour across the United States and Canada, Kerry King promptly declined, even going as far as to attack Mustaine's personal image in a magazine review later that year. For a brief respite in 1986, both bands seemed like they'd eased the tension, as both were sharing a recording space as Megadeth was working on Peace Sells and Slayer was working on their iconic album Rain and Blood. Things didn't progress much further from there, and the bands went back to trashing each other in magazine articles once again, and refused to tour with one another despite the suggestion of many. Tension remained again until 1990, when both bands released competing albums that year with Megadeth's Rust in Peace and Slayer's Seasons in the Abyss. Meanwhile, Anthrax had released their album Persistence of Time later that year as well. It also sought to tour with either one of the bands. What happened next was legendary metal lore. Anthrax manager Johnny Zazula contacted Rick Rubin, who sought to put Slayer on the bill. Later that month, Anthrax guitarist Scott Ian came into contact with Dave Mustaine about touring. Amazingly, both agreed, and the Clash of the Titans tour was born. If you know anything about metal or rock in general, you will know that the Clash of Titans tour between 1990 and 1991 was known for a legendary bill featuring Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, and Alice in Chains. Prior to figuring out who was on the bill, Kerry King was reported to say Mustaine would run his mouth and get us all into trouble at one tour date in St. Louis. Comments saw no traction for a quarrel, and the tour began without a hitch. The feud would take shape from Kerry King's side once again in 1994. Megadeth were slated to release their long-awaited album Euthanasia later that year. Meanwhile, Slayer were working on their own album Divine Intervention. Complaining about inconsistent studio spaces and constantly hopping around different mixing studios, Slayer often blamed Megadeth for their overblown production for their rushed studio project, resulting in mixed reviews of the album due to inconsistency and poor mixing. Reportedly, Megadeth was also using all of the same mixing studios and just overbooking studio time to give Slayer a rush project for their upcoming release. Oddly enough, in the spirit of competition, Divine Intervention was released first in September of 1994. Nothing else much happened between the latter half of the 1990s and the early 2000s. However, in 2001, in an interview with Fox News, Kerry King was reported to have ended the feud permanently with Dave Mustaine, and sought to bury the hatchet altogether.
Tell me about the latest tour. You're playing dates with Megadeth. It's been almost 20 years since you toured with them, right?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, so you guys met in a... Did you guys, like, meet up in a Fridays and end the feud?
Not too far from that, actually. We did some dates in Western Canada. We did Australia. And actually, you know, when I actually talked to Dave Mustaine, I had just gotten the last issue of Revolver, the Slayer issue, and they had all kinds of old pictures of Slayer and Megadeth, me and Dave, and, you know, all kinds of just memories. And I really thought about it, and I went, you know, I don't even know what I'm mad at this guy about. So the funny thing, the first time I saw him, he was coming out of the lounge at the airport, and I was going in, and I walked up to him. I said, hey, man, shook his hand. I said, I don't think I've spoke to you for 15 years.
Yeah. So everything's cool.
And that was the end of it, you know. Yeah, it's cool enough, you know. He doesn't. We definitely don't hang in the same circles, but I'm not worried about running into him, and I hope he's not worried about running into me because we got a lot of big dates coming up.
From that point, later on, 5 years later, down the road in 2006, Megadeth and Slayer began to share a bill for the first time since 1991 in support of Slayer's new album Christ Illusion. Things got so good that they agreed to Metallica's idea for a tour between the Big Four across Eastern Europe. On the live concert in Sofia, Bulgaria, you could even see Kerry and Dave standing next to each other playing the song with all 4 of the bands entitled Am I Evil by Diamond Head. Following Slayer's announcement of retirement in January of 2017, Dave even opened the gates to even do another Big Four show with Slayer, Anthrax, and Metallica. The tour was declined in the summer of 2018 at the request of Lars Ulrich. Metallica bassist Robert Trujillo kept the idea open throughout 2019. While Anthrax even agreed to co-headline Slayer's retirement tour, going on into tour dates running in throughout 2019. So, that wraps up this beef history. Like and subscribe, and I hope you request for more. Which feuds do you want to see on here? Be sure to leave a comment and let me know. Thank you guys for watching, and please subscribe.